Hey, thank you all so much for joining another episode of Celeste the Therapist podcast. My name is Celeste. I am from Boston, Mass. I'm going to have my guest introduce himself to you all because he's from my rivalry town.
Yeah. Hey, what's up, y'all? I'm Mike Hill, born in the Bronx in New York. So yeah, there's that rivalry between Boston and New York. I hate everything Boston, but I love Celeste. She's a great person.
Ah,
I'm sorry. I'm just gonna be real. We're gonna be real, right? We're supposed to be open. That's what we do in therapy, right? We're
okay.
open, honest. So I got to get my feelings out. So yes, I hate Boston. Let it out now. But I love certain people there. So there you go.
It's so funny because I'm watching the Super Bowl, and my husband did not want Casey to win because he's like, I'm tired of everyone talking about the quarterback. And I said, now you know how people feel about us and Brady.
Yeah, exactly. Like you
I
guys had your run with the New England Patriots and even the Red Sox. And the worst thing about
said,
it, with my sports background is when I was at ESPN, it was always kind of divided. It was either you were a New York fan or a Boston fan. And the Boston
ah,
fans, when they started winning, they just don't know how to win with dignity and love and just respect. And it was all in your face. I'm like, y'all just started winning. This is new for you. Shut up. Be
it's so
quiet. So it just made it so hard. So you started rooting against the team even more so, even if you hate them. But I gotta give a shout out to Alabama too, because I went to high school down there. Shout out to Bessemer, Alabama, where I got my roots and everything and my formidable years. So shout out to the South as well.
So, I met Mike last year. We were on a panel together, and listening to him talk about mental health is very inspiring. Then he told me about his book, so I read his book. I finished it in a few days. So I kind of wanted to bring him on so that we can share some of his story, and you could buy the book to hear the full story. But I want to kind of start off with, even though you were born in the Bronx, most of your life you was raised in Alabama.
Yeah.
Tell people a little bit about your upbringing in Alabama.
Alabama was different. Obviously, coming from New York City, it was an advantage for me coming down to Alabama because when I went to Alabama, I went down there, and nothing against the South, nothing against Bessemer, but there was a mentality that was down there that really, even in a lot of ways, still to this day, still exists because there are a lot of people who I grew up with. They didn't know anything else besides Bessemer, Birmingham, Alabama, so they didn't see a lot. I was exposed to a lot when I was in New York. I got to go to Broadway. I got to see Wall Street. I got to see Park Avenue. So I got to see that, hey, there's a better life outside of the neighborhood that I lived in. When I lived in Bessemer, there was that mentality there. That's all they saw. So, and this is way before the internet and whatnot. So I always knew that we were broke, but I never had the mentality that I was poor, meaning the mindset. Because I think poor is a mindset. Broke is we didn't have any money. So there were times when come home, the lights were off. We had mice, not rats, but we had roaches that had their own identity or whatnot. So I didn't have the best upbringing in the world. And also, unbeknownst to me at the time, it was a lot of trauma that was going on inside my house, seeing domestic violence. My stepfather did all he could. And after a while, I realized that it was the trauma, the way he was raised that caused the effects of the way he was, handling my mom and the way he was raising me as well, and not raising me the proper way. So I learned a lot of things from their mistakes, from his mistakes. And
And when you say when Mike says unbeknownst to him, because you describe a lot of graphic, um, violent things that you've seen in the home.
Mhm.
And for my listeners, when you say that, it's because that's all you knew, right? When you're a kid and you grow up in that kind of environment, that's the environment. But you wouldn't have called it trauma.
No, I
Not in
wouldn't have thought because I thought it was like the same things were happening in my friends' houses. You know what I mean? So, my friends, their moms were beaten or whatnot. And it's like, it's funny because I see right now how you always hear when you talk about domestic violence, how the police show up to your house. I can't remember one time when the police showed up to our house after my mom and my dad had a fight.
Mhm.
One of my earliest memories of my childhood was my mom and my dad having a fight and me not being able to do anything about it. And it still grips me to this day that I was paralyzed because I could hear my mom screaming my name, and I still hear it to this day. I'm 52 years old, and I could hear my mom scream my name, and I was too afraid to do anything about it. So until I started getting into therapy or whatever and started working those things out, I didn't realize the types of effects that those
Yeah.
memories were having on me as an adult.
And then when you look back at your life, and because when I talk to people and they share their story, and for the first session, I can tell if they realized like they were emotionally like in it, and I can tell by the way you shared it and how you didn't find out till 47 that
Mhm.
you didn't really understand what was going on. But what ways did you cope? You may not have called it coping back then, but when you look back at your life and you're living in this house that's a lot of trauma, when you look back, what did you think you utilized to cope?
And I think that's where coming from New York gave me the advantage because I knew there was something different. I
Mm,
knew there was something
yeah,
more. I knew that there
yeah,
was like, okay, this isn't the life I'm supposed to be living. I don't know what it was. I think it was like, once again, being from New York, but also that felt like there was, I think God gives us gifts and he does
yeah,
give certain people favor. And it was
yeah,
something that was innate in me that said, like, even though this is what you have, I always felt like there was more. And I had a
yeah,
grandmother who I love to death, who I adore to this day. And she's been gone for over 20 years that I look and I just remember her telling me that, baby, you're meant to be somebody special in this world. And that resonated with me. So sometimes all it takes is that one loving voice, that one voice that you trust and admire to pour into you something that's going to last a lifetime. So I was
yeah.
able to cope because I was like, okay, well, this ain't it. I gotta have more. So instead of letting it beat me down, I allowed that, or I made that my motivation to get out and do more and never look back.
Wow. And then, even though you had this loving voice in your mind about being more or more, you're bigger than this, right? It's not like it was a straight line professionally for your career. Because do you think, I know at first you wanted to be in sports, like a player. Do you think part of that was because a lot of times black boys typically see people successful in that career back then? Now it may be a little different with the internet and stuff, but back then, do you think that was where that motivation came from?
Yeah, that's all we saw. I mean, like in a lot of neighborhoods, and still to this very day, you talk about. I can go
Yeah,
to a school right now and ask them how many of the boys here want to be professional athletes. And like
yeah,
80% of them raise their hand. They want to be professional athletes, and they don't even play sports at their school right now, but they want to be professional athletes. How many want to be rappers? And another 80%, the other, outside the sports and athletes, they want to be a sports figure, and they want to be a rapper or somebody like that, or some kind of
right,
entertainer. So they look at
right,
that as the way out. And then you say, how many want to be doctors? How many want to be lawyers? How many
right,
want to be teachers? And the numbers start dwindling down. So it's what they basically see. Now it's different once again because you do have the internet, because we do have YouTube, because we do see the examples out there of black men
right,
being represented on television. We see President Obama being the president. So
right,
we know that the sky is not necessarily the limit. We can just limit ourselves with our mindset. But I do believe that that's the way people look at as the way out, because when you look at our billionaires, a lot of the billionaires, the black billionaires, are people who are entertainers. You see the Rihannas of the world, you see the Diddy's of
yeah,
the world, you see the Jay-Z's, Beyonce's, Oprah Winfrey's of the world. Those are the billionaires that we see. Whereas
mhm,
for the most part, white billionaires are people you wouldn't even know existed because
right,
they don't have the flash and all the dash or whatever. So we need to have more of those examples out there that are black billionaires like Robert Smiths of the world to be a
right.
little bit visible and given more of a platform in order for us to realize that, hey, you know what? You don't have to be a rapper or entertainer in order to make
Right.
it.
Yeah, I think Earn Your Leisure, the podcast, is doing really well with educating our community about different ways to earn money, and ways to get there outside of sports. But for you, sports didn't quite work out for you.
I was sorry.
Uh,
I was terrible.
it's okay. It's okay.
It worked out
That's,
another way,
no, I
I
know. I know.
Yeah, I knew at an early age that I wasn't gonna. I tried to play, and I was okay, but I wasn't good. Okay, I wasn't great. Okay, I was a guy that when I was in the military, I played football and I played a little basketball for the base team or whatever. But at the same time, I knew it wasn't gonna go anywhere. But I love sports. I had a passion for sports. So how
Right.
do I find ways to a means? And early in my life, when I was younger, I actually met a guy when I was in high school. My first wife's one of my girlfriend at the time was her uncle. His name was Michael Hill. And he happened to be a reporter talking about representation in the area in which I grew up in. So I saw this man that was on television that looked like me. He had the same name as I did. And I'm like, I want to do that. And I'm
Wow.
like, so newscaster, but I said, you know what? I don't want to do news. I want to do sports. So I kind of went into that lane. And so when I went into the military, that's the kind of the route I took as far as taking me on
Hmm.
that sportscasting career.
So yeah, Mike went to the military, which is common. for people in the South. I feel like, so I grew up in Boston as a teenager. I moved to Jessup, Georgia, which is a small town
Mm-hmm.
similar to where you grew up with the dirt road and trailer parks. And
Mm-hmm.
when I turned 17, ready to graduate, the recruiters was there. I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I went to the military. You went to
Oh,
the military. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was. We have similar stories.
what's up? Okay.
Yeah. So you went into the military because growing up in the South and education's not pretty highlighted out there. I feel, in my opinion, when in the smaller towns. What was that experience like for you being in the military?
I felt like the military was my option at the time.
Yeah.
I felt like I needed to go to the military because I saw what a lot of my peers were doing when they would go to college. A lot of them
Yeah.
would go to college and they would spend a half a semester pledge or something like that, and then come back home and get an odd end job working at the factory, working some kind of job at Walmart, being a manager or something. Like, nothing against that if that's what you want to do, but they would go and they wouldn't have the means to go back, or they would just drop out. So I knew I
Right.
needed the discipline at that time, and I just knew that my home situation just wasn't the most stable in the world. And even though my mom said that she would sacrifice everything to send me to college for those 4 years, and I didn't want to put her through that position because I knew she was in an abusive relationship that maybe she wanted to get out of one day, and I don't want to put her in a position where she felt like she needed to stay in it. So I decided to go into the military. I had two cousins who I looked up to, two of the male figures in my life, the best male role models I had in my life at the time, that went into the military at the same time. And I saw how well they were doing. They had brand new cars. I'm like, they got brand new cars. Man, I want a brand new car. You know how it is. You grow up in the South, you don't have any money. You see somebody with a flashy new car. Once again, just like that mentality. Hey, they got a flashy. How did they get it? Just like drug dealers. Hey, how'd you get that new car? How'd you get that chain? How'd you get this? Luckily for me, I didn't look at the drug dealers. I looked at my cousins who had gone to the military, came back, made something themselves, nice clothes, cologne, nice cars, whatever. I'm like, that's what you get in the military? Sign me up. So I signed up for that, but went in with the right attitude of saying that I'm gonna do my time. I'm also going to go to school while I'm in, and I'm gonna pursue my career as a broadcaster.
Now, you're African American, you're black, and it's not always a lot of opportunity for us, especially back then. When it comes to being on TV as a sportscaster with no experience. Tell people a little bit about your first experience on trying to get in. My goal, when I think about your story and how you got to where you were, there was a lot of obstacles
Oh my God.
where the fact that you're still here is amazing. But that inner voice matters. And something about, for me, it's always been, oh, you say I can't do it, I'm gonna do it better. And I feel like that's probably what got you through those moments. Tell people about your first experience into the field.
Well, just trying to get into it is tough. They always tell you that to get into the market, you got to have experience. Well, you got to. Where am I going to get the experience if I can't get it to this from the smaller markets, right? So while I was in the military, my last year in, I started sending out tapes and resume tapes because I had an internship and I was working at the local
Wait,
Fox station.
Mike, we gotta tell the young people what they mean. They're tapes. What are you talking
Yeah,
about? They don't know
tapes,
what tapes
exactly.
are.
So this is now they have reels where you can actually send it online. You can send it through an email or whatever. I actually had to actually put some physically on a tape, not a cassette tape, but like a big deck tape and 3/4 inch tape. This is something where you have to actually edit and sit in the bay and do all that type of stuff. This is all like this is all prehistoric stuff that kids wouldn't get today. But look it up. Look up 3/4 inch tape, and it's like that big and about that. And I actually had to put it in an envelope and take it to the
Wait,
mailbox.
why you
I said,
gotta say prehistoric? You said
huh?
my daughter. Why you say prehistoric? My daughter said to me one time when she was explaining something I wouldn't understand because I was born in the 1900s. I'll never be able to unhear that, Mike. And now you're saying prehistoric. It's
It's
not that
prehistoric.
far.
That is, it's the kids don't know. They don't know what a cassette tape. They would not know how to work a cassette tape. They would not know how to work an old answer machine. They would not know how to
A
work a
phone.
rotary phone. Nothing like that. All that type of stuff, please, man. I was thinking about making a show, and I'm not going to get a show idea out of just trying to put kids in situations where they don't have new technology and see if they can adjust to it. See who can adjust better. Anyway, back to it. It's like I sent out like 75 tapes in order to try and like, okay, by the time I get out, when I have a job or whatever in broadcast, whatever, and I got 72 rejection letters. And what I did was I kept every rejection letter and just put them in there. And then I got 3 callbacks. 2 of those callbacks were giving me critiques on my tape. One of them was telling me how horrible the tape was and what I needed to do to adjust, and maybe I need to think about another career. One of them was really nice. I remember the lady from Colorado somewhere was basically saying, okay, just do this, this, and that. And then one was from Hagerstown, Maryland. And it was like a month before I was about to get out of the military. And I remember the day they asked me to come in for an interview, it was like a snowstorm. I mean, one of the biggest snowstorms that Maryland has ever seen. And luckily, Hagerstown was about 80 miles away from where I lived. And luckily, grace of God, once again, this is Jesus always looking out. I had a 4x4. And the interview was supposed to be at 10. I left my house at 5:30 that morning, 5:30, 6 o'clock that morning. It usually takes about an hour and a half. I got there at 9:30. That's how bad the roads were. And I showed up, and I remember the guy, news director Bob Bourne-Gesser, saying, I didn't think he was going to show up. And I was like, there was nothing in the world that's going to stop me from showing up here. So I did the interview and do all that type of stuff. Did not hear anything. It was a month, once again. And I was wondering what was going on. I get discharged from the military February 5th, 1995. And I remember going into the office, and the first sergeant said, well, Sergeant Hill, what are you going to do with your life? And I'm like, it hit me. Like, for the first time, I'm like, I'm unemployed now, because from high school to the military, what am I going to do? I got a wife. What am I going to do, man? And then the anxiety hit me. And I just remember almost going to like a little minor depression. I guess the first time you go into a minor depression, because like, wow, it didn't work out. I didn't get a job. And I remember I went to my boy's house because I had already packed up all my stuff from my old house and was going to move. I guess I was going to move in with my brother for a while down in Virginia. And I went and took a nap. You know how when you feel like you get sleepy, when you feel like you're mini depressed, you just want to sleep. Yeah. I went and took a nap. And then 2 hours later, the phone rang. My boy Q said, hey, man, somebody's on the phone for you. And it was Bob Bourne-Gesser, the guy from the news director from Hagerstown. He said, hey, you still want this job? And I said, of course. And I'll tell the story all the time. That was great because I was unemployed for 2 hours and I took that job. Now, I could have had a job outside of broadcasting because I worked at the NSA. I could have had a job making $75,000, $80,000 a year, which for a 24-year-old back in 1995 was a lot of money to start off, because I could have worked in public contracting, could have worked for Boeing because I had the top secret clearance or whatever. I turned all that down because I wanted a job in broadcasting. So my first job in Hagerstown paid me less than $7 an hour, and I couldn't have made that. That was the best decision I made in my life. So I tell people all the time and kids all the time, 2 lessons I learned from that. Always follow your passion. Your passion is going to lead to your money, and your money is going to lead to your career, and your career is going to lead to your lifestyle. You're going to make the money. And you can get 100 opportunities and hear 99 no's, but all it takes is that one right yes to make your life the life you're supposed to have and catapult you into your purpose.
Yeah, and you see, it didn't come in a nice package. The first gig that you got, it took work, and unfortunately, I think the hard part about social media is that people think everything just comes together because we show the highlighted reels, and when there's a lot of grind work behind the scenes that you've done over the years, that's gotten you to the place that you're at today professionally.
Yeah, it's a lot of ups and downs, and people and that's one of the reasons why, since I've been on this mental health journey, when I started about 4 years ago, started writing the book, and it helped me get a lot of things off my chest and a lot of traumas that I didn't know I had. I tell people all the time that if I hadn't written that book, that I wouldn't be here right now. I would have stroked out, I died, or literally would have died. I was having that much pain inside that on the outside, I had this mask on because I had a great job, television, making a lot of money, doing all this type of stuff, living this lifestyle on social media. Everything's good, blasting music, popping your chains and all that type of stuff. But on the inside, I was suffering. I was dying. Yeah. So I would sit up in my room at night, at home or on the road, if I was on the road with the team, and I would just cry for no reason and wondering why I'm crying. What's going on? I'm thinking, I started checking my levels, thinking I needed to take some kind of shot. Maybe I needed some, I got too much estrogen in my body. What's happening? Why am I doing this? Yeah, I didn't know who was going there. Seriously, I went to a clinic. I started taking shots. I'm like, I need something,
it's sad that and how it's not taught. Emotions aren't taught, right? And that it's a human experience, right? Over the last 10 years, I've been talking about mental health because of me struggling with depression growing up and me going to therapy and realizing, like, oh, snap, there's another way to live. And why aren't we
Hmm.
talking about it? Because if we're empowering ourselves, then we're not feeling insecure. We're not trying to purchase a lot of things. We live in a country that promotes and markets things for us to buy.
Hmm.
So when Mike is talking about the crying uncontrollably for people listening, your body and your system can only take so much. And I don't know, everybody's breaking point looks different, but
Hmm.
there is a breaking point, and whether it's physical tears or sometimes there's a lot of medical issues that we'll have because that pain is just getting stuck in our body and it's not
Hmm.
moving anywhere. So Mike started sharing that he started writing the book. Writing could be very therapeutic because you're releasing some of that stuff. Tell
Hmm.
people a little bit about why you decided to start to write, because this is where your kind of aha moment came, because now all of that trauma is not stuck up in your head. It's like being breaking up and it's releasing. Tell people about
That's exactly where it was. It was like because of these crying, I was like wondering what was going on. Some people had told me I needed to write a book because I had told people that were close to me about some of the things that I had overcome in my past, and my mom being abused, my best friend being killed, my dad being a hitman, spending the last 9 years of his life in prison for murder for hire, and the ups and downs of my career and everything, and just like I've always been the happy guy. I've always been the guy that tried to make everybody else feel good, the strong friend. You know what I'm saying?
it.
And
Right.
nobody was there looking out for me. Not that I expected it, but it's just like I didn't want anybody to. I was always the person like, "How you doing? I'm good, man. I'm fine." Deep down inside, I'm hurting.
And
So
you're
that's
probably telling this and you're probably telling the stories like matter of fact, like, yeah, my dad was a hitman and this
yeah,
happened, but not really no emotion, right? As you're,
none, no.
yeah,
It was
yeah,
like hey man, it's like hey, that's life. I'm man up. You know what I mean? I've always taught to be to man up. Don't cry.
yeah,
Some of my emotions that my dad taught me. Hey, don't cry. I remember one time I was a kid and I was playing softball and softball hit me in my face. I mean, he smashed me in my face and I'm crying. I'm 9 years old. And I remember hearing my dad say, "You're a crybaby." And it just stuck with me. And
yeah,
like I just didn't want to cry. I never could never cry in front of him. So all that stuff I suppressed for so many years. And like you
yeah,
said, it's like you have a boiling point. It's like a pressure cooker, and sometimes it comes out, and your tears are your cleansers. And so then there was a voice that said, "You need to write this book." And the voice was God. There was no other voice I could think of. The way you need to write this book. And so I started this outline. And Celeste, when I tell you that's like 300, 400 pages right there. When I started writing this book, I could not stop. It was like every time I would write, I was like releasing. I would just cry and it felt so good to cry, to get it out. I'm talking about like everything was coming out of me. It was almost like I was regurgitating. It was like this. I don't know
yeah.
how to even describe it, but I had this weight that was on me. And every time I would write a chapter, I felt like weight was coming off.
Release.
It was
Wow.
just coming off me, just coming off me, just peeling all these layers and deep down. Then the light started going off. Like, that's the reason why this is like this. This is the reason. Wow, this is like, it was almost self therapeutic in a sense. And then when I wrote the book, I was like, I'm not putting this out because this is too
A
painful.
lot.
It's a lot, and it's too embarrassing,
Yeah,
and I'm a public
yeah,
figure, and this could destroy my career. You know what I mean? And then I showed it to somebody who has like 20 books, and he's like, "No, you got to put this out because this is something that can help other people. People need to hear your
yeah.
story, your journey, your trauma, because people need to know that they're not alone." And that is the reason why I've been on this mental health journey. It's like I will show you my pain, I will show you my embarrassment, I will show you myself, I will give you the inner workings of all my embarrassment if it's going to make you a better person, because maybe that's just my purpose in life.
Yeah, and you said you would try to make people laugh and feel good, and even now, even with this book, I mean, you're still the same person, but just in a little different way with the way that you are talking about mental health. Thinking about like your dad calling you a crybaby and now you're letting out these emotions. Did it feel like you were in this battlefield? I tell people when they're trying to introduce new lifestyles to their life, sometimes there's this resistance that takes place because, you're 40 something years of like, I'm using quotation marks for my listeners, being a man, because that doesn't mean
Mhm.
that you don't cry because you're a man, but in our community, I know like that's what we're taught. And even
Yeah.
women as well, we're taught being strong is not being vulnerable, not crying.
Mhm.
And I had a different definition for being strong is crying, is releasing, because you're not a pressure cooker anymore. You're not at the grace of what somebody does as your tipping point. Did you feel like you were in a battlefield as you're going through the transition during that
Yeah,
time?
it was a lot of conundrums. I felt like I was in a dilemma. You know, it was just this back and forth of just, you know, exposing myself or whatnot and being as vulnerable as I could. I think that's the reason why you see me naked on the book. You see me clothes without the clothes on because I wanted to be. Now I had to be completely vulnerable. That's why I called it open mic and not just catchy phrase, but some of the things that you say, you don't want to talk around open mic because you reveal a lot of things that you think, okay, you start thinking, you forget you have your mic on, you start saying things that you really feel. So this is why I wanted to be completely honest and transparent and put that out there. But yeah, I didn't want to admit, that I cried. I didn't want to admit certain things about, my mom and how, the things I did to women growing up. I didn't want to admit that because I felt like, and it's cost me. I will say that. I think, actually, being married to who I was married to, and nothing against her, but the show that was on and the type of crowd that that watches that show, a lot of the crowd, I should say, that watches the show, they will just hold on to your past and not look at how you're trying to change your life. It's like, okay, I understand that, and that's why I was talking about, like, the mother of my children and my marriages and the things that I've gone through, and like you said, not being a man, because we're taught a certain way growing up, and not just the tears things, but like, hey, you get so many women, that's being a man. And I realized through my work and my therapy in this book that the reason why I cheated because I felt inadequate. I felt like, like um if something was going wrong in my life, then I was less than. And what always made me feel better was the touch or the adoration of a woman. You know what I mean? And so instead of running to drugs or alcohol or some other vice, that was what I ran to. And that's what always
Yeah,
made me feel better about myself, which, after therapy, you realize, okay, this is like an addiction that you have to try and overcome. You got to admit that. And that's the way
right.
I've been able to be a better man.
And also, in the Black community, for Black men, sex and multiple women is part of what uh, they have been taught makes them a man. And it is like a food or alcohol or a drug or even school or work, right? There's all of these things that we do that we don't realize it's a distraction, that mechanism that we're using.
Mhm.
And it's not like you're consciously saying, like, I want to get rid of this pain. But, once you do that drug, once you have sex, once you work a lot, you're not feeling these things. And for me, it was school and work. And so once I finished um, my degree, I felt all of these things that I never felt before. And I tell people it's not that it wasn't there, it's just that I didn't make space to be still and feel, right? So
Mhm.
so for you during the pandemic and your stillness is when all of these things came out and you were forced to sit with it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think. Well, I wrote the book. I was finishing the book before the pandemic, but then once I was in the pandemic, I realized that even though I'd written and got rid of a lot of the things that was inside of me, there was still work to be done. I always looked. I tell everybody that the book was my surgery, but
Mm-hmm.
the therapy is the care afterwards. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like it's like your rehab. It's like, you have your
Yeah.
surgery, but you still have to have rehab. If you tear your
Yeah.
ACL, you still got to go to the physical therapist in order to continue to work that thing out and make it stronger, right? And
Yeah.
then sometimes you realize that, okay, you got scar tissue, so you might have to go back in there and do more surgery or whatever. They have
Mhm.
realized they didn't get everything out. So it's important that even though you get it out initially, like I got it out initially, that's why therapy and continual therapy is important, because there are so many things that you reveal over a period of time. Like recently, I had a therapy session 2 weeks ago, and one of the things that was in the book was, and people still don't realize how trauma can affect you for so many years. Something that
Yeah.
happened to me when I was 15 years old. The first time, I don't know if you remember the story. The first
The
time I told
girl
her that I
that you
loved her,
left her. Yeah.
and her reaction. And I mean,
Yeah.
that was pure. When I said, I like, oh, I love you. I mean, that was pure. That's as
Yeah.
innocent. I think back and I remember that feeling to this day, Celeste. It
Yeah.
was so pure and so innocent. I poured everything into her, and her reaction just like killed me. And then what happened 3 days later, when I see her in the hall, unbeknownst to me, everybody else knows, but I don't know. And
Yeah.
so I was talking to my therapist the other day. I
Well,
knew,
finish what when you seen her in the hall. Basically, she was with someone else. So people
yeah,
who
and I
haven't.
didn't know that we had broken up, and everybody else knew because I had a friend of mine that came up to me and said, "Are you still together?" And I'm like, "Yeah, as far as I know." And she like gave me a look like, "Yeah, well, whatever, right?" And
Mhm.
so what I realized with that, I was talking because I have this anxiety now of not knowing things. You know, what are people
Mm.
saying? What's the word? You know what I mean? Like I was like, where's this coming from? Why am I so concerned about what's like when I got the divorce, when me and Cynthia got the divorce, I'll admit to you and your audience, like, I'm like, how's this affecting me when it comes to my jobs and me getting back into journalism and all, are they talking, are they saying, are they believing these rumors that are out there that I cheated and all that? So I'm like, so the anxiety was kind of getting to me. And she's like, when's the first time you remember feeling this way? And
And
then I
you
went
brought
back
it back.
and I remember like everybody was talking about me and I didn't know until it was too late.
Dang,
And I'm
dang.
like, wow. So once again, had I not gone to these therapy sessions, I would have known, where is this coming from? Why is this still inside of me? And that happened when I was 15 years old. So now I'm like, okay, I know I'm enough. I know no matter
Yeah,
what people are saying, I know I'm my conscience and where my conscience is. And
yeah,
I know for me is for me. And I know what
yeah,
God's plan is for me. It's going to be for me regardless of what they think.
yeah, yeah,
But so I don't worry about what the outside. But I had to go back 30 something
yeah.
years, 35 years ago in order to make myself better and whole, more whole now.
This feels like a therapy session because I you're giving me great nuggets to tell my audience. So, what happened, and for parents, right? Because we're adults, we're dealing with different kind of struggles than the kids, and something like that. Like if your kid, not that he told anybody, this was something that he kept to himself, but if your kid is struggling with something, try not to minimize it because you never know how that thing can affect them down the road, and when you think about where you are now, because a lot of times when I'm talking to clients and I'm going through their story, they're baffled at how is it that that thing that happened at 10 or 12 is affecting me 30 years later. The
Yeah.
body keeps the score. It doesn't forget. For me, I tell people it's the audacity of us to try to think that we can outthink what has happened to us when it's been our experience, right? But how
Mm-hmm.
would you know if you've never been educated around it? And so it literally like something as a moment of somebody not giving, and already you're not really feeling love. You're in a house where your mom is struggling, your dad is abusing her, so now you're like pouring it out. So for somebody else they may have been like, oh, that's nothing, but depending on your situation, everybody's trauma and what has affected them is going to look different.
Mm-hmm.
So people that are listening, do understand that just because time has passed doesn't mean it can't come up. And even for
Mm-hmm.
me, when it comes to, I tell people, uh, I never care about what people think or anything like that. But, my therapist was able to point out that, like, when it comes to being a parent, I do like overthink it only because I don't want them to struggle. Right. And so,
Mm-hmm.
I always have a lot of self dialogue, but that's because of the way I was raised and a lot of trauma. And so I'm like, I don't want them to be this way.
Right.
And so, no
Right.
matter how much healing that you've done, you still will have triggers, but the difference with dealing with it is
Mm-hmm.
that now that you're conscious of it, you're not going to let it be the story, right? So if Mike didn't deal with his traumas, like after the divorce and stuff, that could have created more anxiety where you could have isolated yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And from something that happened years ago. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, that's why the work it's so important. Anytime you go, like I choose to go to therapy all the time, and sometimes I'll go, and I go every 2 weeks now. And I was going once a week, but I go every 2 weeks. And sometimes I go and I'll meet with Ray, and I'm like, I'm good. I don't have anything to say right now. I'm like, wow, okay, I'm in a good
Feels good,
space.
yeah.
I don't feel nothing. I'm like, it's off.
Yeah.
And then she may say something that may trigger something. And then it'd be like, yeah, I didn't think about that. And blah, blah, blah. And how I feel about this. And all of a sudden it's just released. And I tell
Yeah.
people the importance of a therapist is like, well, you got to find the right therapist for you. Don't get me wrong, but I always
Yeah.
like the therapist ain't there just to talk to you for an hour. The
No, I
therapist is
don't.
there to listen to you talk about you. You have to
Yep.
reach deep down inside yourself and find the innermost vulnerability that you can find. You got to go in, and it's going to be painful sometimes. I have a
Yeah.
good friend of mine now, and I'm trying. I'm like, please go to therapy, please, because I'm listening to her stories, and she'll be like, "This happened when I was 15 years
Mhm.
old." Blah blah blah. I'm like, I said, "So what else?" And like, I don't remember. And I'm like, "How did you not remember that?" Like,
Yeah.
I don't remember. It's because she has suppressed it so far. She's put it
Yeah.
so far and hidden it so far
Yeah.
away that she chooses not to because it's too painful.
Yeah.
So, but it's still affecting her whether she knows it or not.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, you have to go in and you got to go to that spot. You got to go to that door where you have hidden that trauma, and you got to find the key and you got to unlock that door. And as
Yeah.
painful as it is, you got to let it out because it's affecting you. So yes,
Yeah.
it's hard, it's painful, it's a lot of work, but you got to be willing to put that work in. So when I go talk to, or I tell anybody when they go talk to a therapist, talk. Find out what's going on. Hey, what's
Yeah.
happening in your mind? And then the right therapist is going to give you triggers. How did that make you feel? When is the first time you felt that way? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Well, and then give you maybe some exercise on how you can overcome something like that. That's
Yeah.
what a therapist is for. A therapist ain't here to tell you how to live your life. A therapist is here to help you live your life better, to open up your life to the
Yeah.
possibilities. We think we have great lives. Like right now, I'm blessed. I tell people all the time, they ask me how I'm doing. Right now, I'm in between kind of jobs, whatever, but I'm blessed. I mean, I got money and all that type of stuff like that. I'm able to pay my bills, whatever. And it's something, but I know something's coming along. And I work all the time. And I went through a divorce, had four. Last year was the hardest year of my life. But I still tell people that I am far from perfect, but I'm still better than most. And so I'm blessed.
Mhm.
But I want to
Mhm.
get better every
Mhm.
single day. How do I do that?
Right.
There.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. So for you, therapy has been, and for people that therapy may not have worked. I believe in therapy because I'm a therapist too, and I'm in therapy. But I do know for some people, therapy has not worked, or they haven't found the right therapist, or they may not be able to afford it. I do want to encourage you to not give up, and even if it's just starting with writing, even if it's like a support group, they have support groups online. There's a lot of books, audio books that you can read. So I definitely would challenge people that may have hit a roadblock with finding a therapist, or struggling with that, to just start with writing out what you're feeling, and how you're doing, and not give up on your journey. And even as you're on your journey, I would say to people, it's an everyday journey, right? Every day is a new
Mhm.
day to be better than who you were yesterday. It's not like Mike's arrived, Celeste hasn't arrived, right? I
Mhm.
just feel like we're just going, and I learned how to go from surviving to living life. And
Yeah.
that's why I do this podcast, and that's why I talk to people like you, is because I just really want people to know, like, living life like feels different than surviving life.
And I think a lot of times we survive as a people, black people, we have
Yeah,
always been taught to survive. This is just the way it is.
that's it.
Oh, that's man. Oh, that's just
Exactly.
the way it is. Man, you can live that way. I don't want to live that way. That ain't just the way it is. It ain't got to be that way. If you
Yeah,
put in the work, you will figure it out and realize
yeah,
that life can be so much better. Other
yeah,
people do it. That's how they survive. That's how they continue
yeah,
to thrive. Make your mind better. It's going to make your physical better. It's going to make your
yeah,
emotions better. It's going to make everything else
yeah,
around you better. And guess what? It's going to make your relationship with other people better. You
yeah.
cannot say that you want to go to marital counseling and figure out your marriage unless you figure yourself out.
Individual. Yeah,
It is
yeah,
like the individual has to fit into the piece that comes together. You have to be
yeah,
whole yourself. And that's why,
yeah,
like, when I say now, I'm like, anybody that I ever get involved with, they have to be whole. They have to, they're that therapy, that has to be a background there where I know you have taken those steps or put in that work to make yourself a better person. Nobody's perfect, obviously. We're all here, but you have to be willing to work to become a better person every single day, no matter how good you think you have it right now.
yeah. No, you're right. When before I let you go, I want to know what your regimen is like. You just shared with my audience last year was the toughest year um, so far, and you're here, right? What is it that helps Mike on a daily basis? Because I tell people, for me, my medicine is like uh, going to the gym. I love nature. I love listening to music. I love Les Brown. He's a motivational speaker. I listen to him every day. Sometimes I hear the same things over again, and it just motivates me. It's like the same way you can eat pizza every week, and it's you still love
Yeah.
it, right? What would you say your medicine is in life right now for yourself?
First of all, just prayer, just believing and having that faith in God and knowing that, everything's going to be all right. My life is, as you read in the book, has been full of ups and downs, especially when it came to my career. But because of
Yeah,
everything I went through last year, it was a combination of everything I've gone through at a time, where I've
yeah,
lost jobs, where I went through a divorce, where I lost members of my family and friends to death or whatever. I've been through all that trauma, not all at the same time. You know what I mean? So it's never been
right.
like I went through a divorce last year. I lost a job last year. I had 4 deaths last year or whatever. It's just a lot that was going on, piling on or whatever. And so it was tough. But because I've gone through those times before, it's prepared me to be able to handle the situation. And also because of therapy and my faith in God and knowing that, okay, I've been here before. I can look at my scar and I can see, hey, you know what?
Mm,
I'm tougher because I've been here. Like I tell everybody that scar used to be a cut that needed to be healed, right? And it had to heal
yeah,
over a period of time. The
that's
healing
good.
process, you're gonna have a little bit of a scab, and you might scratch at the scab every now and then. It might
Yeah,
bleed again. You gotta fix it. Then eventually, if you leave it alone, you take care of it, it's gonna become a scar. You look at it, it's gonna
yeah,
remind you of where you used to be, but it also that scar is going to be much tougher than the skin that you used to have, right?
so
So I look
true.
at my scars from my past and I realize that I've been here before. I got plenty of scars. I look at that and stuff like that. I'm tougher. I can handle all that type of stuff. So prayer and my spirituality first and foremost. Going to the gym, listening to T.D. Jakes, Joel Osteen while I'm in the gym, just that
Okay.
motivation or
Yeah,
whatever. And the
that's
most
nice.
important thing that I continue to do to maintain who I am in my regiment is I find my peace. My peace is the most important thing to me. My joy, my happiness, and keeping my joy. I will never allow anybody to take my joy. One of the reasons why, and not this is not a diss to anybody, so I don't want anybody to take it the wrong way. The reason
Yeah.
why I'm single today is because my joy is the most important part of me. So when anything that is around me or whoever is with me, it could be a family member, it could be a friend,
Hmm.
it could be a colleague or whatever. If
Hmm.
it's if my joy, I don't feel like my joy is there anymore, I have to take an emotional vacation from it. And sometimes that
Hmm.
includes divorce or whatever. Once again, no shade to anybody. But like I said, it said if it costs you your peace, it's too expensive. I can't
When
do
it
it.
comes when it comes to that part of your causing you your peace, this is something you've learned after your healing process. I'm assuming,
Yeah, I mean,
or
but
yeah,
I've always known a long time ago, and you read in the book when I was in Dallas, I had a lady tell me, don't ever let anybody steal your joy, baby boy. Don't like, and it
yeah,
was just like, that's yours, that's mine. My
yeah,
happiness is mine. Like nobody can make me happy. I make
yeah.
myself
It's
happy.
true.
But guess
It's
what? I'm
true.
not gonna let you take it away. You can add to it.
Right,
I want you to add to it because I'm gonna pour
right,
into you. But you will
right.
never take away my joy. Like it's almost like you have a car and you have a line that says, "Hey,
Yeah,
you got to when that light comes on, you better fill
yeah,
it up." And if they continue to do it, they're gonna say that car's not gonna work. So I always keep mine at a certain level. Like this is my
yeah,
joy
yeah,
level.
yeah,
You
yeah.
start to that level, and you're not pouring in, and I'm pouring into you. What are we doing here?
So, if you think, for my listeners, if you think about a cup and it's full, right? And I know a lot of people allow people to steal their joy. I always do hashtag create your joy, because we live in a chaotic society, and if you're Black in America, we live in a system that wasn't even designed for us. And
Mhm,
so, how is it that we're able to maintain peace? It's because of the way we curate our environment, what we listen to, what we do, but who we allow in our circle, right?
mhm,
So that's a great point, of what you're saying. It's because you can allow somebody to take your joy, or you can remove yourself, right? And sometimes removing yourself from especially family can be hard. And I think sometimes with family, like that could be one of the reasons why we stay is because in the Black community we say, oh, it's blood thicker than water.
Yeah.
And sometimes we gotta just be like, you know what, but I need my
Mhm.
peace, But if you don't know that and you're just going with the rhythm of how things used to be, you'll find yourself drained, and so you want to make sure your cup's full. Understand your bandwidth, like what you're willing to tolerate and what you can't tolerate. And I think a lot of people don't understand that for themselves.
Yeah, when I tell people that all the time, the first thing, oh, I could never not say speak to mom like, 'cause I told people, I'm like, man, look, I love my mom, but I've had to cut her
Right,
off. I'm like, look,
right, right, right.
if it's negative, if it's taken away from me, if it's taken joy, like
Yeah,
yeah, I will always be there. It doesn't mean, and I don't like using
right,
cutting. Like cutting off means like
right,
I'm not going to be able to get it back. But maybe I tie it in a knot and I throw it over here and I put a barrier between us because I need that emotional.
right,
I'm not saying that you can't come to me if you need something and I'll be there
right,
for you. I will be there for you.
right,
But I need to take an emotional vacation away from that because if it's negative, if it ain't bringing me happiness and joy, I don't want it. I don't want it. I don't want it. If it's continuous. Now I understand people will
right,
have their days. Don't get me wrong. I'm not gonna run
right.
away like negative thing you say. I'm not gonna run away from you. But if it's continuous and you want to, that's why people when they're even in their miserable states, and I'm
Yeah,
trying to help people out of their miserable states, I can tell people, hey, I'm here to help you. I'm here to
yeah,
help you get better. But if you
yeah.
want to continue to stay in this state right
That's
here,
fine. Yeah.
want to try and bring me down,
Nah.
I'm I'm gonna lift you up, but you damn sure ain't gonna pull me down. I will
Right,
be
right,
here.
right.
Damn sure not. You're not pulling me down. That's not happening.
That's good. I love that. Now last question for people that are listening that are struggling. First, get his book. You can find it on Amazon. Really great read. Where so many, it felt like I was reading a diary
Mhm.
with all of these revelations. What would you tell somebody that's struggling right now about like what they should do? Because I remember on the panel, I think you closed it out, but you was very passionate about this part about um, telling people not to give up and create getting that hope. What would you tell somebody that's listening and they're feeling inspired by you and by your story and by like your healing process? What would you say to them?
But look deep down inside themselves and ask them where they are and say where you want to go, how you want to be a better person. And once
Mhm.
again, like you mentioned, sometimes you can't afford therapy. You can't go to therapists, but you got to find that safe space. There's somebody
Right.
that is in your life that is willing to listen to you. And I say willing to listen to you, not necessarily talk to you and give you all the kind of advice, but sometimes you just need to be able to let go. So even if
Yeah.
it's in prayer, God is always there. So
Yeah.
you got to be able to let go. And what I will say to most people, and not just the people who need help, but the people who are around people who seem strong or people are struggling, you need to make yourself available to those people to let them know that you're here to listen to them and that you're not
Mhm.
going to judge them and that you're not going to try and change their lives or whatever, but you want to try and make them better.
Right.
I tell people all the time, it's so important that we have support from our community. And that's what I was talking about at the end of the panel. We need to have
Yeah.
that support from our community because we have this whole misconception about, oh, you going to therapy, you must be crazy. You ain't nothing wrong with you, boy. You need to take that to God, take that to Jesus. What? No, what Jesus
The way I
says,
grew up.
is like yourself in order
Yeah.
for us to get better. God helps those
Yeah.
who help themselves, right? So we
Right.
need support and more people from our community. And we're starting to see it a little bit more and more people start to speak out about it.
Right.
But we need to see more and more people from our community that's like when somebody says they're not okay, we need to say it's okay for you to say it's not okay.
Yeah.
I'm here for
Yeah.
you. Not judge you and not put you down or shun you or run away. Oh, you heard you crazy, acting all stupid over there. No, we don't need it. We
Yeah.
need that mindset and some of those paradigms. So I see the shift. I see it's getting better. We still we still have a lot of work to do. And I'm gonna put in my work. And I know you're putting in your work, but I'm asking everybody out there that's listening, put in the work. What you put in is what you're gonna get out. So if you
Yeah.
need counseling, need therapy, go get the help. And if you feel like you're doing all right now, believe me, when you go to therapy, you'll see how much better you can be doing. It's going to
Mhm.
change your life.
Hmm. Yeah, because I tell people when there's a picture and you're in it, you can't see it clear. But when you're on the
Mm,
outside in, and when I'm talking to my clients, I say, my therapist helps me understand some things where I'm like, oh, I didn't even see it that way because I'm in the picture, right? I'm caught up in the emotion of it. So, having that outside perspective can really help. And it's all about shifting the way you think. Because Mike's trauma hasn't changed, Mike's history hasn't changed. Mike didn't hit the lottery. Mike got a new perspective. When my clients are, getting into this, like, wow, I feel great. And it's like, did you hit the lot? These American benchmarkers that, we think is the happiness. We realize it's not, right? We
mm-mm.
realize it's really about our mind shift.
Yeah, it is about our mind shift. So
Mhm.
change your mind, and everything else is going to change. Seriously, they like what they say: shift your mind and your heart, and everything else will follow. You know what I
Yes,
mean?
yes, yes.
Like so,
Yeah,
it's
that's
the
the old
mind.
song.
The mind controls everything. Your personality,
It
your attitude.
does.
They talking about speaking into existence and being manifesting whatever your mindset. You
Yeah.
tell your mind. If your mind, it's the most important thing that you have going. People will go to the hospital. They will like when you go to the hospital and you have a pain that's killing you. You could be your knee could be
Yeah.
hurting for 3, 4, 5 weeks,
Yeah.
whatever. You go to where does it hurt? You'll point exactly to where that knee is hurting because you want to get that knee some
Yeah.
help. And then the doctor can evaluate it and hopefully fix
Yeah.
it and make you better. And then the rehab it. It's the same thing. People don't want to say it hurts here because we're so afraid we were taught to say that it doesn't hurt. We hurt here. We hurt
Yeah, we
here. We've
do.
just been put into this world and existence that we have to be so strong, especially black
Yeah.
men. We telling black
Yeah.
men, like, man up, man. Continue to man up. It's going to be man down pretty soon. And when I say man down, it's going to be 6 feet down. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You're going to be dead because it's going to, you
Stroke.
really, it's
Yeah.
stroke, heart attacks,
Heart
that
attacks.
stress,
Yeah.
all these things that we have that we're susceptible for black men,
Yeah.
strokes, heart
Yeah.
attacks, diabetes, all that type of stuff starts
Everything.
right
Yeah.
here. And people don't
Yeah.
realize when you fix your mind, everything else, man, my physical
Flows
didn't start
different.
becoming better until I got this right up here. And that's the
Yeah.
mindset. That's the discipline.
Yeah.
That's the,
Yeah.
the the strongness of it, whatever. And once again, like you
Right.
said, you was talking about people crying. It is not weakness, it's work.
Hmm.
It's not weakness, it's work. When you say, I need help, I
Hmm.
need help. I'm doing well for myself, but I still need help to this very day. And I will continue to get the help I need in order to make myself better. You do it for every other part of your body, continue to do it for your mind.
That's good. And you heard it on from open mic from Mike. Open mic. We had an
Yeah,
open mic today.
yeah, always.
Mike, thank you so much for your time. Sometimes when people come on, they're like, "Oh, it's gonna be a therapist." They get nervous. I hope you wasn't nervous. I hope I was okay with you.
Uh, you're too comfortable. Yeah, you're brilliant, and I thank you for everything that you're doing. Believe me, we need more and more people like you. We
Uh-oh.
need more and more of our faces and more therapists out there because we feel a little bit more comfortable talking to people like you. So thank you
Oh,
for what you do.
good. Thank you. Thank
Mhm.
you, Mike. I appreciate